17th or I believe it's the third Thursday of every month, in Tampa, Orlando, usually Fort Lauderdale and Miami at American Social. We do have a networking event. This month on August 17th, we are going to be holding it instead of Fort Lauderdale, we are holding the event at Boca, at the American Social in Boca Raton, Florida in Meisner Park. Thank you all again for joining. Also on August 17th, we have another webinar coming up. It's called Navigating Compliance Challenges. That will be another great event to attend. It will be held over Zoom, so please feel free to log in and join us for that event. Well, thank you all for joining. Today, our panelists, we're going to be talking about New York. The title of our panel today is Cannabis in the Concrete Jungle, Navigating New York's Green Revolution. Again, my name is Amanda Barton. I'm with Mr. Cannabis Law. We are a boutique law firm that focuses on the cannabis and psychedelic industries. We also have from our firm, Andy Sick, who is of counsel with our firm. Andy is an attorney that's licensed to practice in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Michigan. Andy, do you want to give us a quick bio about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Amanda. Like Amanda said, I'm Andy Sick. I've been practicing for 15 years as an attorney, originally doing business litigation and outside general counsel stuff. And I went on to have some of my own startups and have my own law firm where I focused on business and tech startups and cannabis before joining up with Mr. Cannabis Law, where I kind of head up our New York, New Jersey, Connecticut operations and, help people in all stages of the cannabis business life cycle.
Great. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Next we have Karen Meshkoff, or K-Mesh. She is the CEO and founder of K-Mesh Can, which is a coaching and consulting firm that helps professionals and entrepreneurs build thriving careers in the cannabis industry. She has at least 5 years of experience in the cannabis industry as a leader and has placed over 100 executives in the industry for leading cannabis operators. Welcome, K-Mesh. Give us a little.
Thank you so much, Amanda. That was such a beautiful introduction. I really appreciate it. I'm really glad to be here. You really said it all. As you said, I've been in the industry for about 5 years now. I do live in Philadelphia. And I work nationally. It's been very exciting to see the East Coast finally come online. Lots of burgeoning new markets for us to get involved with and help grow, and all the growing pains that go along with that. So thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to today's conversation.
Great. Thank you for joining. And last but definitely not least is Paul Yao. He is a partner and founder of Harbor Community. He's also the CEO and board member of Union Square Travel Agency, which is one of the leading and preeminent dispensaries in New York, adult use dispensaries. He's also the CEO of Fifth Avenue Travel Agency. Welcome, Paul. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us here. I got involved in the industry 5 or 6 years ago when I was at a venture firm that was involved with ArcView. And through ArcView, I got involved with a vertically integrated business in Massachusetts. And when New York legalized, I formed a group called Harbor Community with some like-minded friends and colleagues to go after New York licenses. And we're fortunate enough to partner with the Doe Fund and open our first store, being Union Square Travel Agency. And we're partnering with some other card licensees to open other stores as well, including Fifth Avenue.
Amazing, amazing. As a lawyer, I do have to give a quick disclaimer, and this presentation is just for general information purposes. Nothing is to be construed as legal advice, and by participating in this panel, it does not create an attorney-client relationship between myself or Andy or our firm. However, if you would like our services, please feel free to reach out to us after the webinar. But I'd love to just kind of jump right into it. So I'll just give a super quick background on the history of the regulatory framework within New York. So in March of 2021, the state passed and the governor signed into law the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act. It's commonly referred to as MRTA. So if you hear us refer to MRTA, that is what we're referring to. It's actually the Marijuana Act. And this is what authorized the adult use of cannabis. Now, in February of 2022, a little over a year later, a new law was created, and that law allowed conditional cultivators or adult use processors. It created this conditional license for cultivators and processors, and that law authorized eligible hemp growers or processors to apply for a temporary license. Then in July of 2022, the Cannabis Control Board for New York approved rules and regulations for conditional adult use retail dispensaries. You hear these referred to as CARD a lot. So if we refer to CARD licenses, that's what we're talking about, the conditional adult use retail dispensaries. These are really the first adult use retail dispensaries license that were issued in New York State. Now, in May 2023 of this year, the Cannabis Control Board announced revised proposed rules to MRTA that went through a public comment period, and I believe went into effect either, I believe, end of July or early August. Andy's going to speak a little more to the changes in those rules. And then in June, there was a big announcement. Originally, the governor had mentioned a fund, but we didn't hear about it for a long time. But in June, the state actually announced a deal with Chicago Atlantic to fund $150 million for the New York Social Equity Cannabis Investment Fund. So we will be talking a little bit about that fund a little bit later today. Now, before we jump into the nitty-gritty and talk about some of the rules under MRTA itself, Kamesh, I'd love to talk to you about kind of like what is the intention or what was the spirit behind MRTA?
Sure, that's a great question and a really important one to ask. And I think that, if you're an investor who's looking at opportunities in New York, or you're a professional who's thinking about maybe I'll relocate to New York for career opportunities, understanding the really unique nature of the New York program is very important. And I think even before we talk about New York, we have to just remind everyone that national cannabis, there really is no national cannabis industry, right? Like we are a state by state regulated industry. So every state has really their own unique industry that's vertically integrated. And so all the rules are different. With the MRTA, this legislation is really the most progressive piece of cannabis legislation we have ever seen in this country. And when I say progressive, I mean that the intention and spirit of the regulation was to give business opportunity and wealth creation platforms for people who were most impacted by the drug war. The industry that we have built, the legal industry, is built really on the back of a gray and black market, which has been thriving in this country for many decades. We have an enormous black and gray market. Now we call it, really the most appropriate term is to really call it the legacy market in New York. And so the spirit of this legislation was written with that in mind. And so what it identifies, and I'll let Andy get into more details here, is that 50% of the licenses that are going to be issued at any time for now and the future of this program are going to be to people who have been justice impacted and have been are brown and black folk from those justice impacted neighborhoods that were most impacted by the war on drugs. And the social equity framework of the MRTA is really in that spirit that those are the people who should be benefiting from the business creation opportunities and the wealth creation that will be forthcoming.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. And before I turn to Andy, I did forget to mention, folks, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A below. And at the end, we are going to be taking questions from the audience. But if you have any questions in the interim, please feel free to drop them in and we'll get to them by the end of the program. So feel free to interact that way. Andy, could you kind of summarize the main framework of MRTA? Now we understand the kind of the state's intention behind it, but can you kind of explain the framework? Are there different license types, or how was this legislation written?
Yeah, sure. It's very interesting how they did it. It's unique, as Kamesh was saying, like top to bottom, as compared to other states that we work in. So, for example, there are different license types and they're broken up into different tiers. And so there's essentially 11 different license types, from cultivators, processors, distributors, there's cooperative licenses, micro business licenses, retailers. delivery, nursery, on-site consumption lounges, and that's just the main 9. Then there's registered organization license types as well. So they're offering a lot of different options out here, and then there's even you go into the specifics of like the micro business license types, which are very different than what a micro business license is in let's say New Jersey, where a micro business is just a smaller business. Where in New York, a micro business can be a fully vertically integrated business that has everything from cultivation operations down to retail and everything in between. So so it's very comprehensive, and there's a lot of opportunities for everyone.
I did find the micro business qualifications. It's just a very interesting license type. It's almost to me like comparable to like a craft brewery, in the sense that you can grow, you can sell, you can do a lot of different things. What I found also interesting was this concept of a true party in interest. Can you kind of explain how MRTA classifies and what is a true party in interest?
Yes, I can, and it's really it's complicated. It is kind of the best way to put what a true party in interest is. But basically, a true party. So New York, and maybe I could back up a step and just say, most states will classify you based on whether you're an owner in the business or something like that, in order to restrict ownership participation in multiple entities. So, but in New York, what they decided to do was take a step back and be like, you know what, we don't want any hidden moneyed interest kind of backing people or things like that. So what they created as what you have to disclose for each entity that you're involved with are these true party and interest criteria. So if you are a true party in interest, then you have to be disclosed in the application and everything like that. So a person would qualify as a true party in interest if they're a shareholder or a member in the organization, if they're married to someone that is one of those things, and if they have some sort of like management role or something, things like that. Then it also gets down into other classifications, where if you're getting over 50% of the net profits or 10% of the net proceeds or net revenue, or if you're, so right now it's in flux, but if you're making over $100,000 off the entity in a calendar year, and now it's changing to if you're making over $250,000 off the entity in a calendar year as some sort of contractor or something like that. So those are rules that are changing, and maybe we can talk about that a bit later. But so there's a lot of ways to be classified as a true party in interest, and once you are, then that restricts how many entities you can be involved with. So if you're on like the cultivation, let's say, and you're a true party in interest, then you can only be involved with one cultivation facility. If you're a true party in interest on the retail level, then you can only be involved with 3. And then it gets even more complicated with passive investing. If you're a passive investor, then you can be involved with more, but I can kind of leave it at that. And let's just say that it's complicated, but I think the intention behind it's a good one.
Yeah, I found really interesting how broad the category was, because in other legislations that we've seen in other states, it like you said, it was more limited to owners, operators, managers, people with control. But I thought New York was interesting because they really did try to cast a super wide net with that true party and interest. And I think it kind of had unintended consequences, because some of them were so nitty gritty that even consultants like law firms or engineers or people that do typically charge a little bit more money for their services could technically get into that category just by the amount of money they're receiving from that organization. But another follow-up question, can an owner or a true party in interest have multiple different types of licenses? You kind of touched on this. So is it possible to own interest in every single type of, like, let's say 5 different license types?
Yeah, so the way New York is doing this is, and to answer your question, no, but it's also, again, a little confusing, or you just got to understand how it works. So it's there. New York created 2 tiers of the licenses. So they broke those licenses that I mentioned before down to 2 tiers. So there's like a tier that's more of on the supply side, and then there's a tier like that's more customer consumer facing. So then there's the cultivators, distributors, and processors. Let's say that's if you're in that tier, you can only have one of each license type. Now, if you're in the more consumer-facing tier, which would be dispensaries, consumption lounges, and delivery services, and in that tier, let's say if you do a retail dispensary and you're a true party in interest, then you can have up to 3 retail dispensaries. Now, if you're considered a passive investor, then you can have investments in as many as you want, as long as you don't hit the maximum threshold for passive investing on the retail side. But if you go up to let's say like a cultivator, let's say, you cannot have multiple license types there, or even out-of-state licenses, like multiple out-of-state cultivator licenses. So there's restrictions in that sense.
It's very confusing. Even as a lawyer, I read the rule, and it took me a few times to read it to even grasp it. It's confusing. It's a lot.
Yeah, I have to read the true party and interest thing like again and again. I'm like, am I getting this right? Am I getting this right? But you just have to like work with the numbers. And the other thing is parties can kind of adjust and manipulate the numbers or their contracts with other parties to fit into certain categories as well. So so that's part of the problem with the flexibility in some of these numbers.
Interesting. Now, recently, a few months ago, the Cannabis Control Board announced revised proposed rules, which I know went through a comment period recently. I know there was a lot of changes, but could you just summarize some of the most significant? Like you mentioned, they changed the threshold regarding the true party and interest. What were some of the other changes, if you remember?
Yeah, so some of them were they're looking to allow like dispensaries and consumption lounges and things like that to have operations at events like festivals or cannabis specific events. So that's one of the big changes. There's new regulations for delivery services. They also are going to allow, one of the interesting things is they're going to allow not consumption lounges, but within dispensaries themselves, a little consumption lounge, basically for people to smoke just within the dispensary. So that's another big one. And they're also going to allow for provisional licenses. So kind of what happened with the card licenses. So you're not required to have your real estate locked down before you do your initial application. So that's really beneficial for a lot of folks. And and then also for the true party of interest aspect, they increase that minimum threshold of what would be considered a true party in interest from $100,000 to $250,000. There's a bunch of other little things in there too, but those are some little highlights.
Well, thank you so much for giving us the background on MRTA. And I think for anybody that's looking to get into this, start with the law. I mean, it's really super boring to read and it's really long. But if you really want to get into this space, it's important that you take a look, just cozy down on the couch with these rules and make them your best friend, because that's really what's setting you up for success. Even if you hire attorneys, like we'll help guide you, but we're not going to be there in the day-to-day operations of your business. And if we are, you're paying us way too much money. So I do think it is important for you to get comfortable with these rules if you plan to operate in this space. Paul, I'd like to talk to you a little bit. There's been so much interest in the New York social equity and investment funds. Could you talk to us a little bit about what is that fund? Who can benefit from it? What can the loan be used for?
Yeah, sure. So the social equity fund, it's a $200 million fund. You touched on $50 million was invested into it from New York State, and the balance was the private sector. You referenced that Chicago credit fund. The $200 million fund is only for justice-involved licensees, and specifically the first 150 provisional licensees are eligible for the fund. And I know we're going to talk about not-for-profits versus justice-involved licensees a little later, but my experiences were that we weren't eligible for the fund because we had partnered with the not-for-profit. Having said that, my understanding, speaking to people, is that the way the fund works is that the fund uses that money to procure real estate for licensees. They use that fund to pay the security deposit, to do a build out, pay the first month rent, and then they hand that over effectively to the licensees. And then there's a set period where the licensees have a rent-free and an interest-free period before they start having to pay. And the concept is that this sets up the licensees to be able to operate the business, generate enough working capital, and be successful with that operation. And so if you do the math, $200 million, 150 licenses, it averages out at around 1.3 million per license. So, depending on where you are within the state, it can go a little or a lot, far.
Definitely. And I think it's interesting that New York's actually taking the initiative to help secure real estate for these people. It's not just a loan, they're actually securing the real estate and giving people, helping them actually find a location that works within the area.
Yeah, and I think, Andy touched on this before. I think when you think about more, holistically what New York State's trying to do is, they're trying to set up these regulations such that the first wave of licensees, don't get taken advantage of, that they can control it, that they can, create some generational wealth. And that's what all these rules are designed to do. They're really designed to, insulate and try to protect the licensees. And an extension of that is, giving them access to capital through the fund.
Yeah, I'll just jump in here to say that I think the challenges, and I know we're going to spend some time talking about, recent news out of New York and how that may, further delay things. Some of the challenges, I think, Amanda, that have come up are just the discrepancy between really the quite beautiful, outline that the MRTA has offered us and how that's working in terms of practical rollout. And there is, quite a gap still in sort of making the vision into a reality. And that's where I think, that to me, that's really where I think we are in New York, is we have this beautiful vision. Everyone in some ways, wants to move forward that vision, but it's really like in all states, it's a process to getting there.
Absolutely. There is a lot of discrepancies, and I would like to, touch on those a little bit later on, because, there has been the provisional the provisional cultivation and processing licenses that were issued quite some time ago. And we do have a lot of farmers and processors that have plants in the ground and have all this product and are having difficulty selling it. So there has been some creative solutions brought by the state recently, but yeah, there is a big disconnect, like you said, between what is beautifully set out in MRTA, but versus the actual rollout thereof. So we'll get moving so we can get to some of those topics as well. Paul, can you touch briefly on card licenses? Can you tell us a little bit about the different types of card licenses and what it means to be justice involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So certainly to be justice involved and to be eligible for a provisional card license as a justice involved individual means you were convicted of a marijuana related offense before March of 2021. And so you could be directly involved yourself, having a conviction. It could be your parent, spouse, child, legal guardian, or someone you're connected to that way. So there's a few ways you can get it, but the overlay, you can be justice involved, but to be eligible as well, you needed to have an interest in a profitable business as well. And that business had to be profitable for a minimum of 2 years. And the intent there is to try to give licenses to justice involved individuals who've got some business experience who can successfully run the dispensary once it opens. So that's the justice involved. They also did something which was really unique, and it's the first of its kind anywhere, which is to open licensing to not-for-profits, but specifically not-for-profits which serve justice-involved individuals. So the not-for-profit must have a justice-involved individual in the organization, and there's specific requirements as to what they do, if it's a board member, an officer, or someone on the committee. But that not-for-profit also has to have a clear mission of providing services to people who've been involved in the criminal justice system. So we partnered with the Doe Fund at Union Square, and they've got a history of over 30 years, helping almost 30,000 homeless and formerly incarcerated men kind of rebuild their lives from economic opportunity, housing, and support services, job training, employment. So that's how they fit the requirements to be eligible for a license.
Amazing. Yeah, they do amazing work, and I'm glad to hear that you were able to partner with them and work together. Now, as a card applicant, what was your experience during the application process?
We had partnered. We partnered with a really good consulting firm called Aptitude Plus, who kind of helped shepherd us through. Part of the challenge with the not-for-profits is that it's a federal designation. It's a 501c3, designation, and we know it's federally illegal. So we had to do a lot of work to get comfortable ourselves and get our partners comfortable that what we were doing wouldn't impact their status. So for us, that was the bulk of the work. As it relates to submitting the application, that wasn't too challenging. We just had to collate a lot of papers and do put together things like that. In the end, this not-for-profit class was only 25 licenses set aside for not-for-profits, and I think they had 19 applications. So it was a little different from the justice involved round, where they had to score all the individual applications, because for the initial 150 licenses, there's probably close to 800-900 applicants.
Wow. And I'd love to ask you, Kamish and Andy, do you guys have clients that work card applicants? Generally speaking, obviously don't disclose any attorney-client privilege, but what were some of the struggles that they faced through the application process?
Kamish, you mind if I go ahead and jump into this?
No, I think you have more experience here for sure, please.
Okay, so we definitely have some card applicants as clients, and ours are not the nonprofit variety. So these are justice-involved individuals as themselves. And the experience was, and has been, it's still ongoing, been a little protracted. So like the Office of Cannabis Management actually did a lot of investigation into everyone's background here. And so that was, so that took a good amount of time, and then it took a while to get the initial approvals. But once those initial approvals came through, then everything just moved super quickly. So, the Office of Cannabis Management started moving quickly, getting location approvals started happening very quickly, and a lot of things like that. Now, there's still a lot of justice-involved individuals out there who have card licenses or provisional card licenses, but don't have the funds or are looking to partner up with people and things of that nature. So there's a lot of that still going around, and people that haven't found real estate yet. So that's happening. And maybe we can start touching on the elephant in the room here. Then we're running into issues with court cases. So as we were
definitely go ahead and touch on that. I mean, it sounds like it's made everything come to a screeching halt in the last few days. Yeah, it did. So for those of you that aren't aware, so basically a group of veterans, four veterans, I believe. I'm not sure if all of them applied. Some of them applied for these card licenses, they didn't apply for card licenses. They just wanted to apply for dispensary licenses in New York, and they leased some property, and then New York came out with the regulations after the fact, and they got the property before any regulations came out. And so they've sued the state, saying that they shouldn't have carved out this card license program for justice-involved individuals, and
specifically, and that veterans should have been included as well. And what happened a few days ago was a judge in New York, in one of the New York Supreme Courts, issued an injunction against any further card licenses getting final approval or just basic level approval. So everything is just ground to a halt in that sense, but that's keeping in mind there's all these different provisional card licensees who, we have clients who have put hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars into the build out of the stores, the retaining of real estate, everything like that, and are just about ready to open and get their final approval from OCM, literally like a couple weeks away. And this lawsuit is stopping that. So, and that, goes for many, many, many other groups. So there's been in the lawsuit, there's people and there's other card licensees intervening in the lawsuit saying this is unfair, that you're putting this injunction on it. And then, the state has also replied, putting forward their arguments and including also the perspectives of the conditional cultivators and the conditional processors, that Amanda, that you mentioned earlier, that were authorized to grow cannabis. But if this injunction continues, that will completely stop any new dispensaries from opening. And there's over $1 billion worth of product that they're sitting on that won't be able to be sold and will have to be destroyed or maybe go to the illicit market or what, due to this injunction, because there wouldn't be these dispensaries that are about to open for them to sell it to. So it's a big deal. But tomorrow the judge has a hearing on this. So hopefully we'll get the TRO lifted tomorrow, but fingers crossed, we will see. Paul, you have anything you want to say about that?
No, I think you encapsulated well. It's a very broad ecosystem. So
he's already operating, so he's happy.
I'm operating, but but we're also looking to partner with other people, and we have a number of friends and colleagues, in the situations where they've invested millions of dollars and they're just sitting on the sidelines, and if it continued, they would get irreparable harm. So, it's a challenge for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think I'd also jump in and you talk about sort of the implications of the market being slowed as it has been. If you look at this and I always look at it through a workforce development and talent lens, as that's my area of subject matter expertise, the projections for New York State were that we were going to have, between 60 and 80,000 new jobs created in the next couple of years as a result of rolling out a really robust, fully vertically integrated industry in New York. At this point, and again, numbers are always a little bit fuzzy in cannabis for a variety of reasons, but we probably have, less than 5,000 people in New York working in professional cannabis. That's, we're like roughly 10% of the way there, right? In terms of like what we expect to see when we have a full-flung workforce, and those jobs and that tax revenue, right? The jobs, the tax revenue, that's why states do this. So like we really are unfortunately, keeping ourselves, from the full potential by continuing to delay. And my experience with the different card licensees and applicants that I know, two of whom are involved with the Card Coalition, which is a grassroots organization that has been created to create resources and community for card license holders who are in the process of either receiving their licenses or standing up their businesses. From my relationships with those folks, there is just, unfortunately, just a lot of frustration and disappointment around the speed at which this is all, coming forward. Because if anyone in the audience has ever applied for a license before, that it's an incredible investment of time and money and energy. And so to sort of have this, again, protracted period where they're like in limbo, like Paul said, his colleagues, like, are we going to do this? Are we not going to do this? This lease is running, everything's ticking, and literally plants in the ground, right? Like these are not dry goods. Like these plants have a life cycle. So there's really quite a lot riding on the success of this. of this industry.
Agreed. Thank you for adding that. And since you touched on it, could you talk a little bit about the Card Coalition and what it is and kind of what is their purpose and how do they help?
Sure. So it's a grassroots organization that has been built to provide resources for each other. Like, for example, I know that the Card Coalition built a partnership with one of the New York State banks that is lending and providing credit card processing services to dispensaries in the state. And that's great, right? For them to be able to broker that partnership, get those costs down. You know, what they're trying to do, of course, is lower the barriers to entry to market, right? Operating and standing up a business costs quite a lot of money. I think it's important to note that the fund that Paul was talking about, that you had discussed, the $50 million, or the 200 million that was really promised, and now the 50 million that was earmarked, and Paul, tell me if I'm wrong or I've missed a turn, that money hasn't been dispersed yet, as far as I know. And so, you know, I've certainly
I think some of it's beginning to get dispersed slowly, but you know,
right.
the rollout's not what people want, obviously.
Right. So the promise that the licensees were going to be given access to real estate and the funding to pay for that real estate and other operational expenses to help start up their businesses, those things have not come to fruition. And I think that the real function of the Card Coalition in terms of their mission is to hold the MRTA and the OCM and DASNY to account to hold the OCM and DASNY to account for what the MRTA has promised, right? The MRTA said that they would be there to provide real estate. Well, the offices haven't quite done that yet. And so it's both a community support and also, you know, a real source of resources for a group of folks who are in need of those resources right now.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I'd also want to touch, Karen, on some of the most important elements in starting a cannabis business. Really, it's its personnel. Can you shed some light on strategies on talent acquisition in the cannabis industry?
Sure, I love to talk about that. I think there's a couple things I always tell founders when they're starting, which is, you know, this is a new industry, but fundamentally the businesses are the same, right? You either have a grow, a processing company, or a retail facility if you're a license holder. And so when you're thinking about talent, you really want folks who have experience in those respective verticals, right? And so I tell people, I know it's going to be like really exciting when, you know, your sister-in-law says, like, I love cannabis and I want to come work with you. But like, if your sister-in-law is a realtor, you know what I mean? Like, she may or may not have, you know, the transferable skills. At the same time, you know, if your neighbor has a degree in plant science, or if you know that he has a hobby, so to speak, and grows great plants, he could be a great addition to your team. You know, I think I did have the privilege of working with Paul's team as they were doing some of their staffing. And, you know, one of the experiences that I'll also add is, like, if you're going to run a listing online, which is very common and understandable, you're going to get hundreds and hundreds of responses. So I always say, like, practical tip, make sure you have like several different inboxes set up for that, because you're going to get a lot of interest. There is a ton of interest and excitement around cannabis careers, and unfortunately not a whole lot of real data or understanding of what those careers look like, what they pay, how you get into them. And that's sort of a function of what my consultancy does. But I would say, you know, have those inboxes set up, and also have a real profile of who it is that you're looking for, what skills. You know, if you're running a retail dispensary, you would want someone who's worked at a Target or maybe a Lululemon or an Apple or a Whole Foods, right? If you have a grow, you might want someone who worked at a Driscoll's or another agricultural, company. So the job functions are actually pretty straightforward, and you want to find people who both have those transferable skills, and I would say at least an interest and a belief in the cannabis legalization movement, right? I don't think that the person has to have a strong personal relationship to the plant. It's totally fine if the people that work for you don't engage with the plant personally for whatever reasons. That's a very personal decision. But I do think that I've seen over the last 5 years, the people who tend to be the most successful and tend to be the best performing employees are those who have some connection to why it is that we're making this plant legal, why all the struggle, why all the sort of, kind of like, what's all the nonsense about? Well, we're here because we're bringing a healing and holistic modality to the American people that's been, vilified for 100+ years, right? And there's a real mission and a purpose there. And I think that the best employees are those who align with that mission.
Great information. Now, another quick question I have is, with any startup business, it can be really difficult to afford and be able to attract a high-level, experienced person at a director or C-level suite or higher. Do you have any suggestions for entrepreneurs or startup companies out there looking for qualified staff?
Yeah, I think that one of the things I've seen work most successfully for operators who are working on a fairly lean, budget when it comes to their hiring and talent acquisition budget is to find people who, and I say this a lot, like humble and hungry, right? You want to find those people who are, again, passionate. I use the 3 Ps, passion, purpose, and profit a lot. And it's like, they're committed to this industry for some reason. Again, those are typically personal. They want to be a part of building something from the ground up. And they're willing to, and sometimes, forego sort of immediate profit for a long-term vision. And so I think if you can find people like that, you can teach those people a lot of things. I mean, it's kind of a story as old as time, right? That like, the intentionality is like more important than skills, right? So it's like, and I say that specifically that like maybe you want to hire a C-level person, but you don't have the budget for that. Well, in cannabis specifically, you see a lot of people at the director level who within 3, 6, 12, 18 months can be promoted into a VP level, because they're immersed in the culture and they're passionate and they're leadership. I think Todd wants to say something about that too. If I would say if you're willing to put in some of the time to mentor and support, you can bring in some more junior level talent than you might normally and bring them up to speed fairly quickly.
Wonderful. And just a quick follow-up, kind of on the same thing. You're mentioning training, with the rules changing all the time, regulations changing. Do you have any suggestions on and Paul can weigh in on this as well. I'm sure he's going through this right now as well. What's the most effective way, or do you have any strategy for training new employees?
Paul,
Sure.
I'm going to let you go on about that, but I'm going to jump real quick. This is the one thing I'm going to say. Compliance, compliance, compliance. If you hire one really good person who might cost a little more than you want to spend, make it your compliance person. And now I hand it to Paul, who actually has real life experience and can tell me if I'm right.
No, compliance, 100%. Maybe the first thing we did when we found out we were going to get a license was I called K-Mesh. I knew K-Mesh had a different life, and I knew enough to know that we needed to get professionals on board who had real expertise and deep expertise in different facets of retail, supply chain, marketing, specifically to cannabis. But what we do in a training sense is interesting thing on the sales associates, or what we call bud tenders. We have 50 to 60 employees at the moment, between full-time and part-time. But for those 50 to 60 people, we had over 1,500 applications. And so I echo what Cannabis says. It's like when you put it out there, this is the industry people want to get involved in passionately, and it's wild, like just sorting it through. But from a training perspective, we did 40 hours of classroom training, with all our new bud tenders. We went through, everything from, how the cannabinoid system works, a lot of science behind the plant, different types of products. We had brands come in and present on their brands. And then after that, we did another week of on-the-spot training, getting used to the point of sale systems, the operational workflows and SOPs that we wanted to run in the store between the day vault, the downstairs vault, receiving goods compliantly, labeling, things like that, security, to opening. And then on top of that, what we do is we make the brands come in, a few times a week to continue doing brand training. So we find that's incredibly important. Your bud tenders obviously are on the front lines, and if they're not educated on the product, they can't sell it. So we do everything we can to educate the bud tenders on the specific products. And we encourage the supply chain to do that, because if the supply chain's not doing a good enough job educating our bud tenders, they're not trying hard enough to sell their product.
Very true. Absolutely. Now, from the time you were licensed, Paul, how long did it take you to get operational?
So we put applications in end of September. We kind of got word in early October that we're going to get a license. Licenses were formally granted, I think, late November. But we knew at that point, because we weren't eligible for the fund, we had to find real estate. And so from the time we started looking, it probably took us 2.5 months to find a suitable location and lock it down. But finding real estate in Manhattan, specifically for cannabis in a new industry where it didn't exist, was extremely difficult. People are scared of it. Condo boards and co-op boards don't necessarily want it. You don't have a track record of operating. Depending on your location, there's really large dollar sums of security deposits and sometimes personal guarantees that they want you to put up. It's a real climb, and I can empathize with everyone trying to do it, because it's a really big lift.
What were some of the other obstacles that you faced in trying to get the store open? Obviously, real estate is a huge part of it, but were there any other struggles in trying to get operational?
It's I think you need to find the real estate. You need to find the team. You need to find the team. You need to raise the capital. You need to hire the firms, and you need to get good people around you who can help with the little things like build out and security, supply, choosing the correct supply. Like how do I know how much supply to bring? What you need a good estimate of what my revenue and what the store potential is. And that's candidly one of the biggest questions I hear from a lot of card licensees. Certainly when maybe they've been given the option of a real estate, they just don't know how to deal with, is this amount of lease and loan repayment, can I handle it or not? Because they don't know how to think about what is the revenue potential of the store. And so there's just so many facets to opening a store. And I think it comes back to team, and to be cognizant enough that you can't do everything yourself, and you might have to give up some of your business to attract the right people to help you get to that next level.
Now that you're operational, where do you spend most of your time? What's your main focus?
Customers, acquiring new customers, retaining customers, and our bud tenders. So it's really, it's a people business. It's retail. It's getting people in. It's making sure they have a good experience, and that experience the front line of that is our bud tenders. So making sure that they're fully equipped and they're happy. They enjoy the experience. That's a lot of our focus.
Do you have any operational advice for people on this call that might be card holders or looking to get into the market?
Yeah, I think you just have to think about what the opportunity is. So like for me, it all starts with location. So what is it which is going to drive the people? Is it proximity to public transit? Is it like if you're somewhere regional, like are you attached to another destination draw, which is going to pull people in? Because why are they going to come to your store? Are you trying to make them come to your store specifically just because you're there? Which works for certain places. Like you look at Long Island, which is generally considered a bit of a cannabis drought, just with towns which are opted out. Strain Star's open and doing phenomenally well. That's a destination. in the city, it's a little different with all the different illicit stores. So, you have to kind of think about what differentiates you and what's going to drive people to your store. But then from there, you have to, back into from a point of sale system, how many point of sales do I need? What's the average turn time? Do I want to size my store operations for my, busiest hour during the week, or I just want to do it for kind of my median, average level of busyness? How does that impact the customers? And then it impacts your staffing as well. So there's just a lot of decisions you have to make, and it comes back to how you want to run, how you want to run your business.
Absolutely, and you touched on the importance of real estate, and I'd love to hear your opinions, Kamesh and Andy, as far as what are some of the struggles, or what have your clients run into, or can you speak to the importance of real estate?
Sure. And Paul alluded to this. I mean, one of our big issue for our card clients was finding real estate and finding the right kind of real estate, finding the landlords that would allow it. And then also, if you're in New York City, you're restricted by how far away you are from school. I mean, you're restricted all over the state, but in New York City, it gets more dense. So you have to be a certain distance away from schools, certain distance away from houses of worship, things like that. So, and then you have to be a certain distance away from other license holders. So the territory gets smaller and smaller, and the zones you have to be in get smaller and smaller. So it becomes a challenge for that purpose. And then also the familiarity of landlords. And then also what Paul alluded to, we have several clients in Long Island. That was an issue. They're having issues out there too, just due to the sheer amount of municipalities that opted out of allowing cannabis. So that space just gets super competitive. So that's in just the cost too. I mean, the cost is huge. So
I don't really talk to my folks about real estate too much. I'm focused more on the talent and talent strategy and startup strategies.
Makes sense.
I'll leave that for you, Andy.
No, Paul, you guys have had tremendous success at the Union Square Travel Agency location, and I congratulate you on all you guys' success. Are you planning to expand? I know you mentioned you're working with other groups and other comrades. What is your intention on expanding?
So we try to partner with other justice involved licensees to help them open, and to help them, transfer some of the lessons learned that we've experienced. So we signed a lease for a property on Fifth Avenue, which we're trying to get into the store to start building it out. Our kind of view on the industry in general is that we believe all boats rise. So we think like a really healthy adult use market involves a lot of stores being open. We think it's around educating the customer. We think it's kind of eliminating the illicit stores. And because we're not even through the first inning of New York legal cannabis. One day we'll look back and this was just a speed bump, even though it's a very big speed bump for a lot of people right now. But we, really looking forward to a thriving legal market, and we think that involves, a lot of stores opening.
Absolutely. Andy, everyone's been anxiously awaiting the next round of licenses, taking out the temporary restraining order out of the picture. I mean, who knows where that's going to go, but taking that out of the picture for a minute, what do you think? Has the state released like a timeline, or when do we think applications will open again, for other applicants?
Yeah, so we've been getting little hints and trickles of information for a while now. And, just recently we started seeing that, okay, September, they're going to release the application materials. And then October, they're going to open. And then just last night in this card filing, or in the case filing, when New York put their opposition brief forward, they said it's going to be, the application period is going to open the first or second week of October. So these defendants, or excuse me, these plaintiffs who are suing for the injunction or the temporary restraining order, would not be harmed because it's less than 60 days away from when they're going to start accepting applications. So it's coming up soon, and it takes some time to get prepared. It's not like, and you want to be, OCM has also said they're going to be reviewing these applications in the order that they're received. And, there's going to be distinctions between social equity and regular groups. But I guess the point being, there's work to do, and you want to be there kind of applying on the very first day. And it's not as simple as just clicking a button and submitting your application. So it's coming real fast. So that's exciting. Now the concern would be, and it's not clear yet, but if they're going to keep these licenses open and rolling, and it meaning like New Jersey, where it's just an open application period until New Jersey decides to close it, or if they're going to do it more like how they did with the card licenses, application period, where it's only open for a certain period of time. And it's seeming like that's what they're going to do. I don't know for sure, but it seems like they may just open these license application periods for a number of months, and then that's it for a period of time. Then they'll maybe open them again. So it's just best to get in on the first wave if you can. But yeah, it's very exciting. Like, they actually gave us a date yesterday in their court paper. So that's the one good thing we got out of it. So. Looks like.
Oh, did we freeze Amanda?
Is Amanda frozen?
Overwhelmed her.
I got her too excited about.
That's what happened. We'll give her a minute.
I don't know. I guess we could just kind of continue while we wait for Amanda to unfreeze. I don't know how much longer we were going to go. We're almost up to the hour. And I think something Amanda was curious about was asking everyone if they have any final recommendations for entrepreneurs looking to get into the cannabis market. So do either of you have any recommendations for anyone?
Yeah, 100%. From my perspective, it's all about team. Like, this is so hard to do by yourself. And so this is like what I recommend for people wanting to get in the industry, as well as people, who may have already been, given a license. Find the right partners, because it just takes so much stress off you, and partner with people with the right expertise, because they can really help you get off the ground.
I am so sorry. My internet went out. There's a wicked storm where I'm at, so I apologize.
Welcome back.
Yeah, Amanda, I just asked K-Mesh and Paul, like, if they had any recommendations for entrepreneurs getting into the New York cannabis market. So
my quick, recommendation is, like, if you're on this webinar, you're on the right track. This industry is so much about who you know. And I say that with the caveat of, like, choose your partners wisely, get to know people, understand the market that you're going into, the dynamics, the sort of cultural intelligence, if you will, because each market really is very different. Having worked nationally over the last 5 years, I can tell you, the way that conversations happen about cannabis in New York are very different than how they're happening in Michigan or California or Colorado or Florida. So, understand the uniqueness of each market, build relationships one at a time, find good colleagues that you can talk to. If you need coaching or you need some support around that, reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk with you about that process. And thank you so much, Amanda and C-Lab, for having me.
Thank you all for being part. We have a couple questions. I know we might run a few minutes over. We were supposed to conclude at 5:20, but I definitely, there's some good questions, so I don't want to ignore them. Everybody on the webinar, if you do have questions, drop them in now. We'll try to get to as many as we can. So there was a great question. Is there an estimate of how big the legacy retail market in New York actually is? And do you think a meaningful percentage of them will be truly given accessible path to licensure? I personally don't know how big the legacy market is. I mean, we've seen with a lot of the illicit operations going on in New York, it is quite big, but I honestly don't know. I personally don't know. Do you guys know how big the illicit market is, or the legacy market?
I don't know.
No, I think that's like if they estimate that the legal market could be, $1 billion now, like the illicit market could be a couple billion. Like it probably outsizes the legal market at the moment. And I know that the OCM has, one of their core tenets is a pathway from legacy to legal. So they really want to try to get legacy people into the industry. There's a lot of initiatives like, at Union Square, we partnered with CJEI, with Terence Coffey, to try to bring people from legacy and formerly incarcerated, into the legal market that way. So there's other ways you can get in other than trying to get a license. Like there's a lot of, broader ways to enter the industry as well.
Yeah, and I think to be fair, there will always be a legacy market. There will always be a black market. I mean, that's going to be true for New York, and that's going to be true for any legal market where there is a legal market. And I think the challenge, as Paul identified, for those who are going to take the legal path, how do we actually offer a product and a service that's differentiated, that makes people want to buy from us, especially in a market like New York, where people, may have a legacy person that they've been buying from for years, right? I think that's a unique and interesting challenge.
Yeah, and I just like to add, I mean, it seems like New York has tried also to do a gradual approach with enforcement as well. So they didn't come hard down on the sticker stores at first or anything like that. And, they sent out cease and desist letters for these stores that were selling illegally, and gave people an opportunity to shut down. And a lot of folks did. And then they're transitioning into or preparing to apply in this next round. So I think that warning was also very helpful for a lot of people.
Well, thank you all so much for participating. If you are in New York, go check out Union Square Travel Agency. If you are looking for talent acquisition or strategies, reach out to KMesh with KMesh Can. And if you're looking for legal services, reach out to Mr. Cannabis Law. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us after the panel. But we thank you all for participating, and thank you for your time today. You guys have been great.
Thanks for having us, Amanda. Really appreciate it.
And thank you to you and C-Lab.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.